Kara Loewentheil. Thank you so much for joining me. I cannot tell you how excited I am to have you here because I've been wanting to get you on the podcast for so long. And finally, you're here. So thank you for your time. Now, before we get into our conversations, I'm sure many of my listeners will know exactly who you are. But for those who don't, can you just tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so I'm a feminist mindset coach, really a feminist confidence coach now. And I've been a professional feminist my whole life, one way or the other is what I usually say. I was a reproductive rights and women's rights litigator and then academic, and then I quit to become a life coach, as one does. And now I'm about 10 years into that journey, and I both teach women how to be more confident by changing their thoughts, but also learning the skills that are required to become confident.
Hmm.
I'm sure we'll talk more about what confidence really is. And I train coaches. And I am somebody who, despite being married, still thinks of myself as being single because I was single and childless by choice for a long time. So even though I am actually married, I always feel like I'm like speaking to my other single sisters.
Well, look, thanks so much for the intro. And actually, I want to start with how the sort of journey of how you went from being a lawyer to a life coach. Can you just tell us a little bit about how that happened?
Yeah. So I think like probably many of your listeners, I don't call myself like a seeker because it wasn't spiritual for me. It was more like I'm seeking to fix the things I think are wrong with me because society, right, teaches women that they are these projects that should always be that are always in need of improvement. Like you're always finding projects, things wrong with yourself. I think society teaches women to essentially like self-surveil and self-evaluate all the time. And so then you're always finding what's wrong with you and then you're always trying to fix it. And you think if I just could do that, then I would finally feel good, feel confident, be lovable, get promoted, get a partner. My parents would finally be proud of me. Like whatever it is you're chasing, you just think I just got to fix myself to be able to get it. So I was in that whole life. And so I, like got into yoga and then meditation and I went to therapy. I like did all the things you do if you're in your 20s living in New York City trying to fix yourself. And eventually I found coaching. And actually, the first couple of coaches I worked with didn't really do it for me. But at some point, so in 14, I found my teacher's work, which is a form of coaching that was very cognitive oriented. And I was not looking to become a coach. I was running a think tank at Columbia Law School. I was on the path to becoming a law professor. But it was so powerful. It really changed my life so much. And I just started to see like how much need there was for it and how it was still a way of like, I am very mission driven, obviously, given all the work I've done,
Mm.
but that I had always felt with the law, like I'm I not underselling my accomplishments. I was actually quite good at it, but I did not really have like I had a passion for women's liberation and autonomy and working on and caring about those things. But I did not have a passion for like legal argument and doing it in a legal way. And when I found coaching, I was like, oh, this is the mix. This is like the mission I care about, which is liberating women, helping women be more independent and autonomous and fully actualized as human beings, but in an area that's much more interesting to me, which is like the human mind and self-development. But there's no like gradual progression story that makes sense. I did essentially just decide, okay, I'm going to quit my job running a think tank and become a life coach on the internet. So that was a big, that wasn't a stepping stone. That was a leap.
Yeah.
But that's what I did. Now here we are.
And I imagine it took an awful lot of courage to make that change because whilst I think life coaching is fabulous, but I can imagine that there were people in your life and there was a lot of noise around you going, "Oh my God, what are you doing?" Can you speak
Oh
to
yeah,
that?
I mean, you, yes, everybody. No, I mean my friends were supportive, but like obviously all of my colleagues thought it was insane, and my parents also were like, "What are you doing?" Which I don't hold against them at all. I had no background in business. There was no indication that I was going to be as successful as I am. Like there was indication I could be professionally successful, but nobody would have. I had displayed no interest in, had no experience in business. I don't think my parents thought life coaching was a real job. Some people still don't think that. So, I mean, yes, I think I had to have courage, but of course, the big mistake people always make about courage is they think it means you don't feel afraid,
Mm.
right? And really, courage means you're afraid, but you do it anyway. So
Yeah.
you are able to tolerate the fear, which is something that coaching had taught me how to do. So you don't really have to be you don't have to be 100% of the way there. You just got to be like 51% of the way. You just have to be like a little more willing than you are unwilling.
Yeah.
Um, and I had a whole story to myself that it was like, I didn't even call it life coaching. I called it like cognitive coaching. And I was going to coach lawyers. It was like, it's sort of like somewhat made a little more sense based on the previous career, the way I started it. But that didn't last long. Within like a year and a half, I was just like, I'm a life coach. I coach all women on these things. Um, yeah.
Well, I know that there are a lot of people in this world who are very, very grateful that you made that move. Now,
Thank
I
you.
want to I want to talk about the huge impact that society has on us as women,
Mhm.
because this is, I know, really what you're largely about. So, can you just talk a little bit about the way that society treats us, talks to us, and impacts our minds and subsequently our lives, especially as single women who, as you know, make up the majority of my audience? What are your
Yeah.
thoughts around that?
So that could be like a full year program that we can but I think the way I would boil it down is that society teaches women that their value and their worth are conditional on living up to certain social roles and expectations,
Mhm.
many of which are completely contradictory. But one of the primary ones is being partnered, right? And specifically being married to a man, even though obviously many people do not marry or date men at all. But the socialization they get is still the broader social picture is still heteronormative. It's still like a man and a woman, and you have two kids and the white picket fence, right? So
Mm.
even if you in your personal life do not mess around with men in any way, metaphorically or literally, you're still getting that socialization. And so I think that women are socialized that their value and worth come from things like their appearance, their sort of being in service to other people, their domestic life, their productivity. Like there are a lot of things, but essentially being chosen by a man, which is how it's sort of framed, is equated with your worth and your value. And that programming starts so early. So one of the reasons that I became a coach is I sort of felt like there was this piece missing from the coaching industry, which was this socialization. Like when I came into the coaching field, a lot of coaching was based on cognitive behavioral psychology or evolutionary biology, both of which are relevant, and my coaching incorporates those things, but it was missing the entire socialization piece. So you would have people saying, let's say, well, my family didn't really focus on how I should get married, and I have a great career, and I don't think that I should need to be partnered to feel good about myself. But dot, 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 I still feel, ashamed at every family wedding that I don't have a date. And I still am like fixated on whether some guy named Chad, whose last name I don't even know, is going to Tinder me back. And right, like that's what I call the brain gap. I write about this in my book, which is called Take Back Your Brain. The brain gap is that gap between how you intellectually want to think and feel as a grown adult woman who's probably feminist or feminist adjacent, or at least like thinks that you shouldn't have to be partnered to be allowed to live and be valuable to society, and how you've been programmed from a very young age. And so that programming happened much earlier, right? So yeah, I was a feminist by the time I was in high school. But when I was 2 years old and watching Cinderella, I didn't have that, right? That those messages get started so early.
Yeah.
And I think that is the like people do not like it when I say this because it sounds so retrogressive, but it is true on a subconscious level. Like we have been programmed to believe it's not just being partnered, it's being chosen. Like why do women not want to be the one to propose if they're in the relationship, right? Because you are supposed to be chosen. That's what validates you.
It's so true. It's so true. Because I mean, I think what you're speaking to here is ultimately that 5% of our conscious brain and the 95% of our subconscious brain, which is what is
Mm-hmm.
running the frickin' show. Now, you mentioned the word shame, or you said ashamed.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to talk about shame because so many women that I speak to and I hear from, still, including women in my membership, Thrive Solo, they have feelings of shame, and
Mm-hmm.
and even I, who bangs on about how great being single is and not having kids,
Yeah.
even I can still feel those like
Yeah.
residual feelings of shame because they're so fucking ingrained in my subconscious mind
Yeah.
that in a, most of the time I don't, but sometimes I'll be in a situation, whatever it may be, where I will feel that shame and I'm like, what the hell? So
Hmm.
let's just talk about shame a bit, because it really is such a big one for single women and so many of us feel it. So what are your thoughts on dealing with the shame of being single and not having kids? Whether you've ended up like, because the thing is, it can be the case for people who are essentially choosing to be single, as well
Hmm.
as people who are desperate to unsingle themselves. So it's all parts of that spectrum, you know?
Yeah. So I think that our shame is caused by the thoughts we have about what it means to be single, right? So the way that we close the brain gap is by changing the way we're thinking. So you're surfacing those subconscious thoughts that you usually don't want to look at or don't want to admit you have. They feel retrogressive, they feel painful, they feel like you want to distance yourself from them, but they're there. And that's why self-compassion is such an important part of this process. And so I actually teach something called the confidence compass, which is these 4 skills you need to build confidence. And the first one is awareness of those thoughts, like being honest with yourself that they're in there, even though you don't like them and you don't want to believe them and you party doesn't believe they're true, but they are in there. The second step is self-compassion, because the shame comes from that belief we've been given that there's something wrong with us, that, being single is a mark of being unchosen, unlovable, flawed, damaged, something wrong with you. Like, why do we fetishize engagement rings so much? Yes, it's the, engagement ring advertising complex, but also because it is this shorthand signal for like, I'm good enough.
Yeah.
Like, and now everybody can see when I walk down the street that I'm good enough, that I've been chosen, right? And then we judge ourselves for that. So it's like self-compassion, both about the shame. So it's like changing those thoughts about what it means to be single.
Yeah.
And then we judge ourselves, some of us, for some people are very straightforward, like, no, I'd like to be partnered, or I don't want to be partnered, but let me say this a different way. It's like some of us just feel one layer of shame about it, about being single. And then some of us feel shame for caring about being single or wanting to not be single,
Yeah.
or right. So it's like multiple levels of shame, right?
So
Like I feel
true.
ashamed because I'm single, and then I feel ashamed because I think I shouldn't feel ashamed that I'm single, right? So it's like multiple layers of shame.
Totally.
um so that self-compassion and that self-awareness are really the 2 pieces to changing shame. It's like being honest with yourself about what your thoughts really are. It's okay, it doesn't mean they're true. It's like we don't want to look at our thoughts because we think they're true. They're not true. They're just what you were taught to think, but they are in there and you need to find out what they are. And then really bringing that self-compassion in before we even start to rewire it. Like, we want to change our thoughts immediately, but if you try to change your thoughts without going through the forest of self-compassion first, it's not going to be effective. But ultimately, the way we get rid of that shame is by changing our thoughts on purpose from the thoughts that are creating shame, whatever those are, like, I screwed up, I've done it wrong, I'm not good enough, it's too late, everyone's thinking this about me, whatever it is, like changing those thoughts bit by bit. When you fully have your own back, you fully believe in the way you're living your life, you don't feel that shame, right? And you don't worry about what other people think about you. Like, I used to have a lot of drama about what other people would think about me being a life coach, because naturally when I first started, like I said, I only had 51% willingness. So like I still had a lot of drama about it. And now if somebody thinks that being a life coach is dumb, I'm just like, that is hilarious. Like, I work for myself. I'm financially independent. I make more than I ever thought I would. I help women all
Yeah.
over the world. I get to talk about the brain. Like, literally, this is the
Yeah.
best job in the whole world. But that's
Totally.
because I changed my thoughts to
Yeah.
like fully have that and own that. And so that's
Yeah.
what we have to do about being single.
100%. Um, I just quickly have to ask, and
Yeah.
I'm sure you've read Self-Compassion by Kristen Neff.
Yes.
Such a great book. Um, let's talk more about thought work, because, oh my gosh, I mean, I am so passionate about this. I go on and on the podcast about how we have to rewire our brains. In fact, I've just literally done a webinar called Being Single Isn't the Problem. Your mindset
Mhm.
determines your happiness, not your relationship status. And I'm constantly trying to get this message across that we have to look at our thoughts. And like you
Mhm.
say, we have to change them. So, can we just talk in a bit more general terms about what thought work actually looks like, for, your definition of it, what that looks like, and how we go about doing this work?
Yeah. So when I say thought work, I'm referring to really a variety of tools, but essentially rewiring your brain, creating new neural pathways, which means literally practicing new thoughts.
Yeah.
And the reason that this often doesn't work for people is that they've heard of like positive thinking or affirmations or something like that, and they're trying to believe something that is too far from what they currently believe. So they are not getting any emotional payoff from it. And so their brain doesn't want to continue and nothing changes. So an example would be if your thought is, there's something wrong with me that I'm single. It is too far to immediately try to believe I love being single and I've chosen this and I wouldn't have it any other way. If you don't actually believe that, right? So you need to start with like what I call a ladder thought. I have a whole podcast episode on my podcast, which is called Unfuck Your Brain. I have a whole episode called The Thought Ladder, which is about how you build intermediate thoughts. So for instance, an intermediate ladder thought for that thought might be something like, people are single for lots of reasons. It's not because there's always something wrong with them.
Yeah.
Like that would be it, right? So people want to feel better immediately, but actually what's plausible is feeling 10% less shitty.
Yeah.
Step by step. Not forever, but that's where you have to start. And each
Yeah.
time you can get 10% less shitty feeling.
Yeah.
So thought work is really that process. Although it is called thought work, it is very somatic because the way you can tell if you believe a thought is if you feel a little bit better when you think it. And people often skip that. So they're trying to believe these like super positive thoughts that don't feel like anything in their body. It doesn't do anything. Then they're like, oh, I can't change my thoughts. All my thoughts are true. But it's really just a skill and a technique that people have to learn how to do.
I couldn't agree more. And actually, one thing I would love to get your take on is consistency, because in my experience of doing this work on my own brain for the last 5 years that I've been learning about this stuff, listening to people like yourself, reading all the books, listening to all the podcasts, one thing I say over and over again, because I think it bears repeating a gazillion times, is that we have to be consistent when it comes to this work. You cannot just think different thoughts for a week and then expect that your life is going to change and everything is going to be different. So I would love to get your thoughts on how important you think it is to be consistent with thought work, because as far as I'm concerned, it's everything. But I feel like it will carry a lot more weight for whatever you're about to say.
I don't know. You may not like this answer because I
Go
actually
on.
don't love the term consistency. I prefer persistency, because
Okay.
the problem with consistency for perfectionist brains or neurodivergent brains is that, well, it's two different problems but there's overlap. A lot of neurodivergent folks are also perfectionists. The problem with consistency is if you don't do it perfectly, then you've screwed up and you're done. It's like on and off the wagon, black and white mentality, like, fuck it, I've already screwed up. That creates shame. Now you're like fighting through that shame, then you don't practice. So I really prefer, as somebody myself who is like not really a do anything the same everyday person, I prefer the idea of just being persistent, which means when I fall off, I'm going to get back on.
Yeah.
Right. So like people do this with everything, like exercise. Like I've been working with a trainer for years and I have always just given myself permission to like cancel sessions here and there, miss ones here and there, whatever. That's allowed me to do it for years, as opposed to if I had to do it perfectly, I would have made it maybe 2 months, then skipped a week, then now it's
and
all
then given
over.
up because it's like, yeah, no, I totally
So
hear you.
I mean, I totally agree with you that you have to practice. You cannot just be like, I said the thought once, so now I'm done. Like you're
I'm
literally
cured.
building a new neural pathway. Yeah. So so when people come to me and they say the thought's not working, there's only two things that are happening. Either they chose a thought that didn't emotionally connect to them in the first place, or they haven't been practicing it. So I definitely agree with you. You have to practice. But I find that just saying to someone, what I want you to do is be persistent, so that if you stop, you start again, is less baggage than you need to do it consistently.
Yeah, I like that. And actually, I haven't thought about replacing that term consistent with persistent, and I can see exactly why you do it. Now, I just want to go back to, you mentioned affirmations, and I have to say I'm a big fan of affirmations, but I don't think we should be saying single life is absolutely amazing if we think single life is fucking shite. So I love your idea of ladder thoughts. But when it comes to
Also, just to be clear, like you could get to that thought using a ladder. Like the point is to get to that amazing thought you do want to think. It's just that you need to climb the ladder, not try to fly and then fall down.
Yeah, completely.
Right.
Completely.
So I just want to be clear. It's not like I don't believe in, like, my thought about my life is it's incredible. And that's a very positive thought, but that was not always my thought about it. I had to like
Yeah.
work my way up.
Yeah, totally. But what I was going to ask you about affirmations is that I'm a really big fan of recording affirmations in my own
Mm-hmm.
voice and listening to them regularly,
Mm-hmm.
because I think when it comes to thought work and that kind of, persistence, consistency, it's so much about repetition, isn't it? When you're
Mm-hmm.
trying to change the neural networks the pathways in your brain, it's all about repetition. So I'm a really big fan of particularly listening to them in my own voice,
Mm-hmm.
because obviously our subconscious brain is most familiar with our own voice. What would you
Mm-hmm.
say about listening to affirmations or speaking affirmations out when you're doing this kind of work?
Yeah, I mean, if that works for you, go for it. I mean, I don't call them affirmations, and I think that repetition is important. And the more you actually believe the thought you're practicing, the easier and more natural it is to remember it and practice it. So you like need more repetitions when some people are able to take a thought they don't believe at all and just repeat it, repeat it, repeat it until they believe it.
Mm,
I have never been able to do that. My brain has a lot of arguments and things to say, and like that has never worked for me for a lot of my clients. So for me, like having a thought that I do believe that's not as ambitious makes it easier, and I might not need as many repetitions, but I do think you have to practice. And I think if that works for you, that's great. I mean, there are a lot of different ways to do it. Like there are apps you can set that will um, like set off an alarm on your phone to remind you to think the thought. You can write the thought out. You can make the thought your password on your computer. You can make a little song about it. Brains remember. We learn new things. I think it's like 10 or even 20 times faster when they're in song. That's why we teach little kids things in songs. Yeah, well, if you think about human history, humans, the written word is only like 10,000 years old. And before that, for millennia, people were communicating through oral traditions in which you would memorize a
yeah.
song or a epic poem to communicate. So our brains are wired to remember things better when they are in rhythm.
Yeah.
So I'm not musical, unfortunately, but if you are, I feel like it would make it a lot easier to learn new thoughts. So I think like whatever works for you is great. There's a lot of ways to do it. I
Yeah.
totally agree with you. You need to like be practicing exposing yourself to that new thought.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, one thing that I know you talk about, and I talk about it too, is how our thoughts are not facts. Like, we do not have to believe every single thought that comes into our mind or identify with it. I used to absolutely do that. And it really wasn't helpful, because my negative self-talk, as I think for many of us, is pretty bloody strong. And I was just like
Yeah.
believing every fucking word it was telling me about myself. I know you write about thoughts are not facts in the book. So, can you just speak a little bit about how we can kind of separate, if you like, that higher, sort of more intuitive part of ourselves from our monkey mind? Essentially, the way that I talk about it is like our ego from our higher self.
Mm-hmm.
How the hell, if we are not used to, if this is new for someone listening and they've never kind of thought about this thought work before, how can people go about finding that gap between, so that there is a gap between the monkey mind trying to convince you that every thought is a fact, and that higher part of yourself that is just that kind of still small voice of calm?
I don't know if this is going to map onto what you're describing, because I think there's the question of like, not every thought is true. And if I'm trying to teach someone to recognize that not all their thoughts are true, then the best method is to have them practice describing things in a neutral way versus what their thoughts are, right? So, like, my husband doesn't uh, care about keeping our home clean and what I want, when the actual circumstance is my husband forgot to take out the trash, right? So, like, it's teaching people how to notice when they are interpreting, evaluating, judging, like when there's basically an interpretive function happening, right? And your brain is an interpretation machine, and all human language is an interpretation. So, on some level, forgot to take out the trash is also an interpretation, but it's a lot more factual than he doesn't care about what I want or care about keeping our home clean. This is not my husband. He always takes out the trash, but if he's listening. Um, but so I think the way that we learn that our thoughts aren't always true, the easiest way to do that is by looking at the difference between what are facts and what are our interpretations of facts,
Mm,
right? And just practicing that. Like, what's the actual circumstance that happened? And then what is our thought about it? When it comes to like I think you're also partly describing just the sort of position of like what Buddhist meditation teachers would call the watcher, which is like I can observe my own thinking.
Yeah, right.
I think that's a slightly different phenomenon. And that, for some people, meditation is a good way of doing that. In my work, that mostly comes from writing your thoughts down, not just doing it on your head, putting it on paper, and then often doing that exercise of like, what is an actual fact in here? And like, what is all my story? That's how you learn to pay attention to like what interpretation you're creating.
Totally. One thing that I just want to sort of point out to anyone listening is I think that ultimately everything that we're talking about here, and this is why I call it the inner work, everything we're talking about here, it does require time and energy and effort. And I
Mm-hmm.
personally, I don't know what your thoughts are on this, but I feel like people quite often give up too quickly. They sort of brush off this kind of
Mm-hmm.
stuff and they give up too quickly. Because the truth is, certainly in my experience, it does take time and energy and effort, and it is ultimately work. But I would say that it is work that is absolutely worth doing. And also, I'm a constant work in progress. It's not something that ever ends. It's not like you get to a point you're like, ta-da, here I am.
Yeah.
I'm completely in control of my mind. But have you found that people sometimes give up too quickly with this kind of stuff?
Yeah, but I think people give up too quickly on all sorts of things that are hard. And I
True.
think our culture is moving towards this sort of idea. I just have a whole podcast coming out called basically like embrace friction. Like we're using all this technology to try to remove any friction from our lives. Like you can have an AI friend instead of having a disagreement with a human friend. You can have ChatGPT write your blog post instead of having to do the hard work of like coming up with something to say and saying it. Like we're removing all of this friction because humans have an innate, desire to seek pleasure and avoid pain, but friction is really what creates meaning and growth. And so, you can ask ChatGPT to like say nice things to you, or you can learn how to actually think them for yourself. And one of those is much more effective and also doesn't require selling your personal thoughts to a algorithm that will then try to sell you shoes to fix them. So I think that, it does take time and practice, and we all feel overloaded and like we don't have time. And I think the best response to that is that it's just like when you're overwhelmed and you haven't made a to-do list. It's like if you slow down and make the to-do list, it all feels more manageable. And the same thing, right? Or it's like a metaphor I often use, like if you're walking to the store, which is an hour away, and somebody stops and is like, hey, I can give you a ride, you are gonna have to stop and get in the car and put on your seatbelt, and like maybe they even have to teach you how to drive, but then you're gonna get there much faster. So it's worth that time.
Yeah.
But the last thing I'll say is people often give up because they're not seeing any results. And people usually aren't seeing results because they are not checking to see if they believe a thought in their body and thinking a thought that is believable already. So I do think a lot of the reason that people give up is that they're not seeing a result. And that comes from a lot of people in the space, I think, not teaching this in a way that is actually accessible or detailed enough in how to actually change a thought.
Yeah, that's why people need to read your book. So go and buy it if you haven't already, anyone who's listening. Now, one of the main messages of this podcast is that, in my opinion anyway, the most important relationship is the one that we have with ourselves. And
100%. Yeah.
and that we have to be able to cultivate our own happiness rather than expecting to get that from a romantic partner. Now, as someone who is now married, what are your thoughts on this now that you are, coming from when you used to be a single woman, feeling however you felt then, to where you are now as a married woman? I'd love to get your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I totally agree. All of my dating coaching is always like, just kidding, who cares if you meet someone? It's about your relationship with yourself. And I think that's true either way. Paradoxically, like generally once you are able to change your thoughts about what's wrong with you for being single and you remove that shame and you work on believing that you can have a partner if you want one, then you usually find the person. I met my husband right after I had worked on my dating life for a long time, but I had a big breakthrough. I like 3 weeks after I'd met him, but before we had really gotten anywhere, I had a big breakthrough about like the way that I was fetishizing this particular kind of relationship when there was already so much love in my life. And so I'd already kind of done the work on myself, but I was still like the work on my worth, but I was still very fixated on like that I needed this specific kind of relationship.
Right.
And that was kind of the last breakthrough that I needed. And then, yeah, and then I married the person I had gone on 3 dates with at that moment, but I think that was very connected. The other thing I'll say is, as somebody who thought that, before I did this work, thought that having a partner would solve all my problems and make me happy and I'd never feel lonely or insecure or whatever else. Being married is great. He's great. The first 6 months or 9 months of our relationship were horrible. I was like totally triggered the whole time. We did not, he had a very nice, blissful falling in love experience. And that is not the experience I was having. I was like, this is a horrible roller coaster ride. And the only reason I didn't get off, and I think often probably people who are looking for a relationship and are dating are getting off the ride when they shouldn't. So some of them are staying on rides they shouldn't stay on, and some of them are getting off too soon because it doesn't match what we're told it's going to feel like. You're supposed to feel finally validated and good enough, and that you've ascended to a plane of bliss. And in fact, what I felt was triggered all the time, because if you are someone who has been avoiding intimacy, even if you don't think you're consciously doing that, right? You are. If you are someone like so many women think they're so emotionally available because they're like, well, I want to find someone and I want to talk about my feelings and I write all of this stuff, but they're not emotionally available because they're not willing to feel things like rejection, disappointment, like productive conflict. Like it's all still about them and their self-worth, which is not really being emotionally available. So when you do finally get partnered after living your life like that and having to work through that, it brings up a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
I coach women who experience this in all areas of their lives, who have a goal they're fetishizing, and when they finally get it, it doesn't feel the way they thought it would, and they are like devastated. And that is like, I have a friend who spent years trying to make 7 figures in her business. She was like, for her, it's like everybody has their fixation on the thing that's going to prove they're good enough, So for me, it was dating. For her, it was, and I had already made $1 million. I wasn't fixated on that one. She was fixated on that. Years and years, like so much shame, and I'm so behind, and I'm not doing well, and all my friends are doing like all that. She made $1 million, and then she cried for like 2 weeks.
Really?
Because you're losing the fantasy that when you finally get this thing, it's going to be what I call an exit ramp off the human experience. I love my husband and he's wonderful and it's really fun to live with him. And it is not an exit ramp off the human experience.
That is just such a brilliant way of putting it. And how interesting that your friend cried for 2 weeks when she made $1 million. That is fascinating. Also doesn't surprise me. But I
was
love
just
the way that
coaching
you
someone
put
in my
that.
mastermind whose artistic career is blowing up. And she's waking up every morning being like, I'm doing everything wrong and I'm so behind and I should have just gotten married and had kids and had a white picket fence instead. And you're like, no, your brain's just freaking out. Like, this is what you wanted. You worked for it. But as I kept telling you the whole time, it was not going to feel like paradise when you got there. Like, I don't think we can overestimate how much we humans, especially in our current, like, kind of quick satisfaction, everyone should be happy all the time, consumerist culture, are just always thinking that we should be feeling good and trying to get to the thing where we're always going to feel good. And that is just not, that's not the human experience.
Yeah.
But that's why we're so fixated.
And also, I think this feeds back to, the fact that ultimately we have to learn how to cultivate contentment within ourselves.
Yeah.
Like,
And it
it's as
goes
simple
both
as that,
ways.
isn't it?
Like when you're single, if you want to be partnered and you imagine being partnered, you just imagine feeling blissful. You never imagine the part where you're like, if that person speaks to me one more time, I'm going to murder them. Or like they make some decision that you're just like, what are you doing? Right. And then I am also coach women who are like in relationships that are unhappy and they are fantasizing about being single. And I'm like, yeah, you feel lonely right now in your relationship. You will also feel lonely sometimes when you're single. Like they're changing this state. Like when I was doing this work, I did a lot of like, this is a little graphic and also not everybody's straight, obviously, but for me, it was just helpful. I just did a lot of thought work about how having a penis live in my house was not going to fundamentally change my experience of the world. Like, it was just like, it'd be like, it's just like there's another monkey who lives in the house. Like, that's not going to like turn me into a different person or completely change everything about my life. Or, it's almost like we're like, it's magic. I'll never have, if I just have like another monkey in this house with a different or same, whichever genitalia I'm looking for, then I won't like ever feel sad or lonely again. It's like magical thinking.
Yeah. unrealistic thinking. Let
Yeah.
me ask you, Cara, if you don't mind,
Yeah.
what was it that made you stay with your now husband when during those first like 8, 9 months you were
Yeah.
feeling so triggered and you weren't feeling good? Whereas you say he was having this kind of blissful experience of falling in
Yeah.
love
He
and you
was
were
like, this
going,
is
what the
amazing.
fuck
I
is
love you. And I
happening?
was like, ah. I believe a lot and I teach my clients about making decisions based on your values rather than trying to make the right or wrong decision. So people in dating have so much anxiety and insanity, and I have coached not only myself, but so many women in the dating process around like looking for red flags and is this the right decision? And how do I know if it's the right one? And what if I waste my time? It's like all of this trying to make it the right decision, quote unquote, by like figuring out ahead of time if that person's going to be your partner. And so, which is just maddening and exhausting. And it makes you incredibly like brittle and fragile to the normal ups and downs of getting to know someone. So you become really intolerant of any disappointment, any feeling of like my husband did not respond to, we had a video date. It was like towards the end of the pandemic. And then we agreed we were going to meet up for a first date. And then he didn't respond to my text for 3 days about it. And I would have lost my mind previously, but I didn't. And now I know that he literally didn't really know how to use his phone. And then when we got together, I was like, okay, he's older than I am. I was like, okay, we're going to set a text message noise that's just for me. But I wouldn't have been able to get through that, right? Because it would have been
Yeah.
like, this person doesn't respect me and they obviously don't like me. And how could you not respond for that? Like all this craziness. So the reason that I stuck it out was I had decided what my values were in dating. My values in dating were curiosity, honesty, and fun.
As in what you want from the other person.
Not exactly. It's like, how do I want to show up?
Okay.
It's sort of both because in dating, it's like, yes, I'm sort of looking for someone who will approach a relationship in that way as well, or who's like embodies those characteristics, but it's really more about how am I showing up. So for instance, if somebody doesn't text me back for 3 days, what does it look to show up with like curiosity, honesty? What does it look like to be like, this has to be fun or it's not? So it was that what kept me going was that we were having, I mean, I was triggered a lot, but we were having fun as in like we really got along and enjoyed each other. That I was I was curious about what I was going to learn. For me, one of my top 3 life values is growth. So it's very clear to me that like something was happening because I was so triggered. And I don't mean triggered in like I didn't have PTSD, but meaning I had a lot of feelings. I was like very angry a lot of the time. So there was curiosity of like, okay, something's going on here. And if I do want a partner, I better figure out what this is because obviously this is going to come up with somebody else. It's not him. He's like a
Right.
lapdog. But there's also curiosity on his part and growth on his part in that he had really never had a relationship where you talked about your feelings or told the truth. And that was very hard for him, but he was willing to show up and willing to try. So it was like we were both like embodying, or those values were evident in both myself, how I wanted to approach it, and the relationship.
Right.
So that is what kind of kept me going. And I think because I had gotten so much better at managing my own reactivity and not putting my value and worth on it, I could do a more rational analysis of like, what is this person's character? When you are so in like shame and insecurity about being single, you really have no idea who you're dating. You like aren't even really paying attention to them. It's not about them, which is why I say like you're not really emotionally available. The other person is just a foil for your own insecurity and your own desire to prove yourself worthy. And I have to like, I am by no means an apologist for straight men, but sometimes when I'm coaching women on dating, I really feel like, and not a significant amount of the time, what's happening is that men are being a little bit better at assessing fit because they don't have this like
All the stuff.
worth value. Yeah, I was just coaching a client of mine who like went on a few dates with somebody. It seemed like it was going pretty well. He started to pull back. They had a conversation. He was like, "Yeah, I want to talk to you about this. I just think we're going in different directions." And like she has so much drama about it, and because she has internalized so much that like there must be something wrong with her.
Right.
And then it's like, and I feel like your friends will be like, "Fuck him, he's terrible," and it's like, I don't know. I think maybe he was just right that like you want different things. But when we are in our insecurity and our anxiety, it's not just gender based. There are men like this too, obviously, or people of any gender identity. But I think this is long, sorry. The main point I
No.
really want to communicate that I think really changes it for people is like, if you are someone who is dating or you're not dating, but you wish you could find a partner, you want to find a partner, whatever, if you don't work through your own worth and value stuff, I mean, this goes back to why your relationship with yourself matters the most, right? It's like you heal your relationship with yourself, you're either going to figure out that you don't want a partner, you're fine the way you are, you were only looking for one for validation, or you're going to discover you really do want a partner, you're interested in the work of intimacy and relationship building, but you are not going to be able to do that if it is all about your own worth and value, because then what you're just not even, you don't even see the other person. They're just a daily test of whether
Yeah.
you are good enough and you're being chosen, all of that. And a lot of the like, it's like a lot of the things that we want other people to do in relationships aren't really even about the thing. They're about proving that we're good enough, proving that we're special, proving whatever. There's just so much ego involved. And it's not a criticism, but it's just that is the block, because true intimacy is showing up with real curiosity about who someone else is and being emotionally available to support them, not just to like talk about your own feelings.
Such an interesting way of thinking about this. Do you know, two things? Number one, it's just immediately making me think of how we as humans, we just always have our own pair of glasses on, and we all have a
Yeah.
slightly different lens. And whatever our lens is, and like you say, whether that's coming from, problems with self-worth or insecurity or ego, whatever it is, we are seeing through that particular lens. So sometimes we have to be able to remove that lens. And speaking to what you were saying, when you've kind of done that work on your own self-worth, then at least you know that that particular bit of your lens is kind of clear,
Yeah.
even if other areas of your life might be completely fucked up.
Yeah.
The other thing that I just had to pick up on is that when you were talking about you feeling kind of triggered and struggling in those
Mm-hmm.
first months of your relationship, I swear to God, I just felt this feeling rising up in my stomach of like, and I thought to myself, fucking hell, Lucy, that's interesting, because there come my kind of fears of intimacy, terror of getting into
Mm-hmm.
another relationship, all of those kind of things. I could
Mm-hmm.
literally feel your kind of
Mm-hmm.
anxiety in the pit of my stomach. Anyway, well, that's a whole other thing. This isn't about me. This is about you.
Do a thought download later. There's some interesting stuff there. But yeah,
Totally.
but I think that that's what happens. And we get, I think that I think that is particularly, it's particularly common with women who are into self-development and therapy and feel very self-aware, that we like think that we're really emotionally available because we're very analytical and willing to discuss and describe our feelings, which is not the same thing as being willing to actually have a feeling in your body. And it's
Yeah.
not the same thing as being willing to actually like meet another person and see their perspective.
Mm.
Um, and so I feel like there's a lot of us. I mean, I was this person going around talking about how we're so self-aware and so emotionally available, and we really do want a relationship, but there's just no good people out there. But actually, we're not emotionally available at all, because intimacy is terrifying, which it is. Intimacy can be terrifying
Yeah. Yeah. Oh
and
my God.
also wonderful and also tedious and also all the things. I mean,
Yeah.
my poor husband, like every other week, I just look at him, I'm like, isn't it weird that you just meet another person, then you live with them for the rest of your life? And he's like, no, I love you. I think that's normal. And I'm like, I think it's weird.
Oh my God, brilliant. Oh, Cara, I'm just loving this conversation. Now I'm very aware of your time. We've got about 10 minutes left max. So there are a couple of other questions I really want to ask
Yeah.
you. One thing I am super fucking passionate about, and I know you are too, is helping women to live the lives that they goddamn want, rather than lives of limitation because they're playing
Mhm.
small, because they feel like they can't have what they really want. And, I really love encouraging women to go for the lives that they actually want. Not saying it's easy, because it's bloody
Yeah.
not. But, not least because when you're single, it affords you a bit of extra time, a bit of extra
Let me tell
headspace
you
to
how much I
focus on
miss
what.
the freedom of being single. Like, people do not talk this. Part of what was being triggered actually is relevant. I'll just say it quickly, is like, was a lot of grief for the freedom I had in my single life.
Isn't that
And
interesting?
for the openness of that. I think one reason I had stayed single was that I didn't really want to commit to a specific life, because I liked having the possibility that things could go any different way.
It
And I
is.
had like a lot of grief about, especially because I thought I was going to marry someone who was single and childless and we could live all over the world. And instead, I married someone who has two children and we have to be in Brooklyn. And, it was like not the future I'd envisioned. And there was like a lot of grief wrapped up in that. So the freedom of being single is like, you only really appreciate, I mean, I appreciated it then, but I appreciate it a lot more now. Just that's human nature.
Thank you for saying that, because I have to say, that is really refreshing to hear from someone who is relatively recently married, to hear you say that, because I think it's important for single women to hear that from someone who is married,
Yeah. And I have as
because
much freedom as a person could have. My husband literally, like, I'm the breadwinner, he's the primary parent. If I said I wanted to go live in Paris for a month, he'd be like, great, we'll FaceTime you. Like, I really have as much freedom as I want, but it's still different because you take on the responsibilities of like being in a relationship with this person. And for me, being a step parent. And I don't really want to go live in Paris for 3 months without him. Like, I married him because I like him. And now I have these kids that I'm step parenting. So it's not like I lost independence because I got married and now a man tells me what to do. Like, I can still do whatever I want. But intimacy is a reciprocal responsibility and obligation. And it's like done out of love, but it is a constraint on you.
yeah, it's like whatever path you go down in life, there are good bits and bad bits.
Yes.
There, it's like being single and being married. They are simply two different paths. One is not
Life
better
is
and one is
50
not worse.
50 either way. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So going back to talking about women sort of following the lives and the path that they I just feel like there are so many people who are kind of living a bit of a half life, and I want people to feel
Hmm.
alive because that is what we're fucking here for. So
Yep.
what do you think it is that holds women back from going after the lives that they truly want? Because I think if you remove all of the barriers, money often being the big one, if you say to someone, what do you want to do? People are like, oh, I don't know. And if you say, well, if I said money was no object, what would you want to do then? And they're like, oh, right. Well, yes. Well, if that was the case, then of course I'd want to be living in, I don't know, India doing blah, 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 blah,
Yeah.
blah. You know? What are your
I
thoughts on
yeah.
this, Tara?
I think that it's confidence, but I don't define confidence as a feeling. I think confidence is a set of skills. It's a specific relationship with yourself. And what holds people back is a lack of confidence. So, for instance, if it's like supposedly money, it's not money, it's a lack of confidence that you can create the money that you want in order to live the life that you want. If you think what's holding you back is you're not partnered, no, it's that you lack confidence in yourself that you can be partnered if you want to. You lack confidence in how you show up in relationships. If it's whatever other area. So I think that it is confidence, but that when we think of confidence as a feeling, we're like, we have it backwards and we're like, well, I'll feel confident once I get a raise or find the partner or get divorced or whatever. Like, then I'll feel confident. But actually, confidence is really more like it's almost like a combination of vision and resilience. It's like having a vision for what you want your life to be like, feeling confident that you deserve and can create the life that you want. And then also part of what makes somebody confident is having the relationship with themselves that allows you to like go after it and try and fail and figure it out. Just like a little kid is confident in exploring a new space if they have a secure attachment and they know that there's a parent there, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's the same thing. So to me, it's really about confidence. And what that means is learning the sort of the four skills that I think make up confidence, which are self-awareness, self-compassion, self-belief, and self-actualization.
Right.
I call that the confidence compass. So I don't teach the confidence compass in the book because I came up with it after the book, but we are teaching a pop-up coaching program all about confidence in your dream life and the confidence compass. So if anybody's listening to this and they want to learn more about that, you can go to unfuckyourbrain.com/confident. It's just the word. And
Fabulous.
you'll
And
be
I'll
able to
put that
find,
link in the show notes as well
yeah,
for
perfect.
anyone who, yeah. And I'm sure there will be many people who are interested in doing
These are
that.
super fun. We do these like pop-up programs. They're just like 3 to 5 days. We do a call every day. I teach, I train, we do exercises. We have like Q&A calls. If you do the VIP version, you can ask me questions, but they're really fun. And like, you can change your brain a lot in a week with kind of a little bit of immersion.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I wish I was able to go on talking to you for another hour, but I know that you are a busy woman, and that would just be rude and disrespectful, quite frankly, to just carry on banging on at you for an hour. But before we wrap up, I'd love to know if you have any words of wisdom for the single women listening to this. That might be about how you now see singlehood now that you're married, or it
Mm.
might be something about, how you felt about being single when you were single. Any thoughts, anything that you feel called to share with any of the women listening to this?
I mean, you say this already, which is the most important relationship you'll ever have is the relationship with yourself. That is your longest relationship. And anyone you are in relationship with, and it's not just romantic. I mean, even if you love being single and you don't want to be romantically partnered, you probably want to have friends or you have family. Like almost all humans want some human social connection, which, not denying that some neurotypes are less interested in that than others. There's also a lot of data showing that social relationships are a very big determinant of health and longevity. Like most of us are wired for them. Some of us are not. That's also fine. But that, even if you don't want relationships with other people, you still have one with yourself. And that relationship with yourself is really, that is the core of what makes your human experience. Like, I love my husband. I hope we're married for a long time, but I don't plan to stay married if it's not feeling right for either of us. And my relationship with myself, my own self-acceptance, my own self-esteem, my own self-love is not conditional on whether I'm partnered. And it's not conditional on continuing to be a professional success in the way that I am. It's not conditional on how many people sign up for my programs. It's not conditional on how much money I make. Though I think that the root wound of patriarchy is that it alienates women from themselves by turning us into sort of objects to be constantly evaluated and surveilled by ourselves and everyone else. And so I really, on some level, like when I'm coaching women around being single or dating or whatever it is, getting divorced, like usually what I'm saying is I don't really give a fuck whether you're married or single or divorced. What I care about is what is your relationship with yourself.
Yeah.
And that is really the thing that matters the most. And that's what's going to determine the quality of your experience. It's like if you were going on a trip, if you are in a car full of like cigarette butts and smelly food wrappers with a broken AC, and it doesn't matter how nice the scenery is outside, your experience is going to be unpleasant. If you are in a wonderful, comfortable, lovely smelling car with a great sound system, you might see beautiful scenery outside of one kind or another. You could be in the oceans or the mountain or even a boring part. You're still going to have a pretty good time. Like the vehicle is the relationship with yourself, and everything else is really secondary to that.
What a great, is that a metaphor or an analogy?
I don't know. I just made it up on the spot, but whatever. Let's go with
I
analogy.
love it. What are you most excited about in your life at the moment?
I'm actually really excited about this pop-up we're doing because it's the first time I've taught the confidence compass. I taught a little bit on the podcast. It was the first time I'm like take people through it. And I'm just really excited about this new, it's funny, like I started my career talking about confidence and then I've like talked about my work in a lot of different ways. And I feel like I've sort of come home to confidence, but understanding it at this much deeper level than how I used to teach it and how everyone else is teaching it. And so I'm just really excited about exploring that kind of vehicle. And we just got a new cat, so I'm excited about that. Cats are very confident. This one is like,
they are. I mean, they
I
really
own
are.
this place and you.
Well, you and I were talking before we hit record that I've got my cat on your lap and your cat is also down on the floor by your next to you, right? And yes, cats are. We could learn a lot from cats. We could learn a lot from animals, to be honest.
Yeah.
Kara Loewentheil, I cannot thank you enough for taking the time to come on my little podcast. I really, truly, I respect you. I think you are super bright. I think you are fucking wonderful. And I'm just happy that you have, you are rocking your life and bloody well done, quite frankly. And also, how can people find you, follow you, buy your book, listen to the podcast, say what people need to know?
All the things. My book is available anywhere books are sold. It's called Take Back Your Brain. My podcast is called Unfuck Your Brain. It's available anywhere you get your podcasts. You can find me online. Honestly, my last name is hard to spell, but if you Google Kara and some version of Loewentheil and feminist coach, I'll come up. And then if you've enjoyed this, you want to act on coming to join the pop-up coaching challenge we're doing because that is time limited. It kicks off on December, I want to say 8th, and I should have checked that before I came on. So yes, December 8th. I had it right. My team will be proud. We kick off on December 8th. You can go to unfuckyourbrain.com/confident to join that.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. Sending you so much love and hopefully stay in touch.
Thanks for having me.